Hi there and welcome to the Journey to Adyton bonus class for students in the online programs for 2022. Tonight is kind of a kickoff in particular for Soul Shift Oracle. You know, the Oracle program, and I'm so excited that you have said yes, because the Oracle program in particular is one that is taking me back to my roots, my personal foundation. And I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about that because I think it's important for you to know the origin story when I bring you a new program like Oracle. And those of you who are in Crystal Masters and watching this, I want you to know that I hope you enjoy it too. And should you decide to upgrade to Soul Shift Oracle, you can do that. Your membership is kind of malleable. You can change it and move around. So if you watch this and you realize, you know what, I really do want to focus on psychic and intuitive development this year too, because I need that as well, you can always change from Crystal Masters to Soul Shift actually on your My Account page at sagegoddess.com, so that's an option. But otherwise, I hope that you'll enjoy this little journey into my personal lineage and background, and I thought it was fitting to start there. We're not going to really travel to Greece for the rest of the year. We have other countries on our flight agenda. I'm going to be taking you to Tibet and Nepal. I'm going to be taking you to India and Mexico and Madagascar and Brazil. So tonight is really the only time we'll talk about Greece this year, because the countries that we're studying in the year ahead are really countries where a lot of your gems and minerals are mined and sourced from. And Greece, unfortunately, does not bring us as many of our gems and minerals as some of the other countries do. However, in my opinion, Greece is the Western birthplace of psychic and intuitive development. Greece became known for its prophetic offerings, for the priestesses who were able to channel what they believed was the will of Apollo, the god Apollo, at whose temple the Oracle of Delphi sat. And what's interesting about learning about the history of the Oracle at Delphi, which I want to walk you through today, is that it reminds us that it is possible for a thriving civilization to really believe in the power, in the importance, in the possibility that the oracles, the seers, the channels, the mystics can actually bring relevant information through from spirit side to help guide the actions and decisions and choices that we mere mortals make on our path. And so anyway, it's with so much pleasure that I designed this bonus class for you. It's really an offering from me to you to help you kick off your learning for the year to come. Our classes will start the week of the 10th of January while you're getting your tools and getting your altar set up, and we'll talk more about that in the Facebook groups. But in the meantime, the most important thing for you to be thinking about right now in this very moment is how to completely relax and unwind and prepare yourself to enjoy a sacred journey with me. And you know, I really believe in the power of journey work. I think that guided meditations lead us into a deeper conscious awareness within and help us to activate our own spiritual gifts. It's one of the reasons why I incorporate sacred journey, drum-led journey, guided journey into every single month of Soul Shift. Every third week we journey together. This year is going to take us on different journeys to different parts of the world and different parts of our ancestry and our lineage. For some of you, what we're working with tonight in ancient Greece is your lineage, like me. For some of you, it's just a civilization or a timeline or a history that resonates with you but isn't actually in your own lineage and geology. But you might be from Mexico, you might be Brazilian, you might be from India, and so some of the other countries this year will resonate more with you. But I will tell you, even if you don't have an active physical lineage in any of these particular ancient countries and civilizations, I still think there's great value in studying them. And there's a few reasons for that. First of all, you may well have had a past life, right? In ancient Greece or in India or in any of the countries that we're studying this year. And so there might be a longing in you, a calling, a resonance, or a connection with some of the things I'm going to show you and teach you about tonight. And I want you to recognize that that's probably coming from a place deep within you that is finding a synergy here, is finding a connection, is finding inspiration here and saying, yeah, that sounds really good. I also think, as someone who is going to be a crystal healer, or a healer in general, and someone who is going to be certified through Sage Goddess programs, there's certain things I want you to know. I want you to know about some of the birthplace and origin stories of our current civilization. And ancient Greece and Rome and Egypt are all part of that narrative. So as I share a little bit about ancient Greece with you today, I hope it awakens in you a deeper curiosity and passion for some of the ancient civilizations and the wisdom that I think they still have to offer us all these many thousands of years later as we live in more modern times. So, as most of you know, my dad is from Greece. He's from the island of Crete and the port city of Heraklion. My ancestors are Minoan and were part of that original matriarchy that, of course, no longer exists, but was the origin story of the island of Crete in the Mediterranean. And so it was really sweet. As I was preparing to bring this journey to you, I talked to my dad, and at first I said, the Adyton. And he looked at me and he said, Adyton. And then he goes, Adyto, Adyta, right? He recognized it in the singular. Adyton is plural. So it's really funny when you're talking about mythology and history to someone who's a native speaker of the language, it didn't immediately resonate with him because he said, no. In the temple to Apollo, it would have been singular. It wouldn't have been plural. There was only one of these inner sanctuaries. But I'm still referring to it as the Adyton because that's how most historians and record keepers refer to it, and I don't want to be inconsistent with that, but I thought that was very sweet that my dad stopped. And he said, what's interesting about the concept of the Adyton is that it isn't just a sacred place. It's not just a sanctuary. It's the most important sanctuary. He refers to it, his translation is the sanctuary of sanctuaries. Isn't that beautiful? And so to the ancient Greeks, this was a couple of different things, and you're gonna see me look to my notes a little bit tonight, kind of like I did in Crystal Secrets, just because I'm bringing you some technical information too, and I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Those of you who've been with me for a lot of years know that I over prepare for class. It's the professor in me, and I always do have a lot of handwritten notes in my notebook. So I do like to make sure I get through everything that I have written and designed for you. Otherwise, I don't feel like my experience is complete, and a lot of you feel the same way. But when we talk about the Adyton, what my dad was saying, and it resonates with everything that I've studied in the years that I've been trying to understand the Oracle at Delphi. And I want to say I haven't been there. I was very sad. The May before COVID started, David and I had a cruise booked through the Aegean and the Mediterranean, and we were going alone. We were leaving the kids at home. And unfortunately, my daughter became very ill, as some of you might remember, and we canceled our trip, and then COVID hit. So, and we had booked a 2-day excursion to Delphi because it's quite a journey from Athens to Delphi. It's worth it. There's different ways to get there. But we had booked it all and kind of lined it all up, and I was so excited to go and then wasn't able to. I'm sure I'll get there at some other point, and of course, as you know, those of you who are parents, our children come first. So I'm glad I was here for her, and but I still look back and think, I was this close to getting to the Oracle, and then as soon as her health, bounced back, then COVID came, and it was like, it's off the radar until probably another year or two from now. But in any case, it's still on my radar. I hope to get there, and when I do, I will take you live. Of course, in Soul Shift at whatever point that happens, because this is part of our lineage and legacy in our program, and so whenever I get there, I will take you there too. But I'll just say that this is a very important place, and my dad said, to the ancient Greeks, there were parts of the temple to Apollo at Delphi that were really off limits. He said, there were signs. And he was, sharing what the Greek translates to that said, forbidden. it was a very serious business, divination, to the ancient Greeks. And so I'm going to try to give you a little bit of the origin story. I'm going to tell you some of the origin stories conflict about how Delphi was created, and this is true for pretty much most of the history of this particular part of the world. There are conflicting accounts, not a lot of written records, and so those of us who seek to understand it have to kind of piece things together and tie the strings together into a bow. There's even some conflict about whether Delphi is named after the snake that Apollo defeated, or whether the Pythia is named after the snake that Apollo defeated, because it's different words, and so it's like it could be both, it could be neither. So hopefully I won't confuse you tonight. I just want you to sit back, relax, enjoy the narrative and the teaching first, and then we will work with our grid that you are hopefully enjoying. This is our Journey to Adyton grid, which came with your selenite wand and all the stones that you see there. The Adyton perfume, which we crafted with so much love for you, that has some of the coolest rare ingredients like orris butter. I have the whole list of ingredients for you, so when we anoint, I'll walk you through those too. It's got blue tansy in there, which is really good for raising your vibration. So that is a great perfume for any kind of divination or channeling work that you can continue to use for the rest of the year. If you missed it, there are still some bottles at sagegoddess.com. As members of our programs, you have a standing discount to sagegoddess.com. So what you should do is always look at the daily sale code and then look at your standing discount code. And if the daily code is better, use that. If your standing discount code is better, which a lot of times it will be, then you should use your own discount code, and that's part of your membership benefits. So if you would like Adyton perfume, I don't know if we have any of the grids left, but I think we have some of the bottles of the perfume left. A lot of you have been saying it feels like a blend that you're going to want to use every time you channel, and I don't blame you. I think it's got all the ingredients you need. Sandalwood's in there too, which is so good for raising your state of conscious awareness, and so we'll come back to that in a few minutes. Okay. So when I talk about the Oracle of Delphi in Greece, one of the first questions people ask is, so who decided that this was a thing, right? Like that Delphi was going to be the center of prophecy and divination in the ancient world? And the answer is, the legend is that Zeus dispersed two eagles, one from the farthest left point of Greece and one from the farthest right point, east and west. And his goal was to see where the eagles would cross paths, okay, with each other. And his theory was that wherever the eagles crossed paths was the center of the earth. And that became known as the omphalos, which means navel or belly button, right? So this sacred location where these eagles would meet would become known as the omphalos, or the navel of Gaia. So this would be the center of Gaia's body, wherever this was. And you have to know, in ancient Greece, and this is why I'm so proud of my lineage, in ancient Greece, women were revered. When women are mistreated in modern day society, when their rights are not respected, or when we go through challenges related to women in our day and age, there's still part of my soul that is so disrupted by that, because there's part of my lineage where I come from a matriarchy where women ruled. Women would never have had fewer rights than men. It almost doesn't compute. And so I love that my lineage takes me back to this place where women were kind of on a pedestal. And it's not that they were more important than men, but they were certainly, in so many domains of ancient Greece, considered equal. And the uniquely feminine gifts, all of the oracles were female. And we could look and say, well, men have active intuition too, and they do. Some of the best prophets and seers are men, right? Think of Edgar Cayce and more modern seers and prophets and mediums who have unmistakable gifts, right, in our male. But there is something about the feminine and the intuition, right? Female energy is more lunar, right? It's more water energy. And so lunar energy tends to lend itself more to what we can see that's dark, that's not illuminated, right? What we can see that's under the surface or part of the deeper subconscious. Masculine energy tends to be more solar, more projective, right? Like what we see in the broad light of day, right? So masculine energy tends to work more with what's obvious and visible during the day with solar light, and feminine energy tends to rest in more of the yin space, which is that kind of dark, mysterious, hidden, occluded world of divination, right, which is the inner vision rather than the outer vision. So I think this is part of the reason why the ancient Greeks really felt like women needed to hold this particular position, but it was an esteemed position, and there were heads of state and people in ambassadorial roles who would come to the oracle and be turned away, because the oracle, the Pythia, only gave her visions at certain times of the year, and that was kind of a defined schedule. So if you came off cycle, you were turned away, and ultimately that's what led to the destruction of the oracle at Delphi. So back to the original story, Zeus released these two eagles, basically decided that wherever the eagles would meet would be the Omphalos, or the birthplace of Gaia. And they met on the slopes of Mount Parnassus at this particular location. And the legend is, there's a couple of legends. One of the legends is that there was a particular place on the slopes of Mount Parnassus where the goats behaved very strangely. And as a result, some theorize of gases that were being released from the side of the mountain, which ultimately were the same gases that the Pythia would inhale, and they would have kind of a psychedelic effect, and then she would, express her visions. And there's a quote on the outer edge of the temple for Apollo in Greece that says, "The oracle neither reveals nor conceals, only dictates." And it's really true. She would speak in these very complex language patterns, almost poetic. And the visions were sort of cryptic. I mean, they were not very clear. And just remember, she was likely hallucinating from the inhalation of these gases that came from the side of the mountain, which first made the goats crazy and then, sent the Pythias into a hallucinogenic state. Now, in my life, in my practice, I consciously work sometimes with different kinds of plant medicines like ayahuasca, which have a hallucinogenic effect. And they can definitely bring wisdom and divination. I've brought wisdom forward for our communities before from those journeys, and I think it's valid and really useful wisdom. So I don't think we should discount the value of the Pythia or the credibility of the Pythia's gifts, the oracle's gifts, based on the fact that they were likely inhaling these gases. It would be very much similar to us working with different types of plant medicines today, and then channeling and giving oracular visions under the influence of those substances. So I don't look at that. Some people look at that and write it off and go, oh, well, they didn't really have psychic or intuitive gifts. They were just hallucinating from gases. And it's like, well, they may have been hallucinating from gases, but that doesn't mean that they would have had those same exact expressed visions without their own unique psychic and intuitive gifts too. These were women who were chosen, selected, had to go through tryouts. There's some really interesting stories about what would happen when a prospective priestess would come to try out for the role of oracle. She had to go through various tests, and there were like sort of subcommittees of people who would decide whether the Pythia or the priestess to be had passed them. And that woman who was auditioning to become the oracle was not allowed in the inner chamber, in the Adyton. So the Adyton means inner sanctum of inner sanctums. It is the most holy, most sacred, most venerated space within the temple of Apollo. What's interesting to remember, and I was talking to my dad about this today, is that the Adyton, the inner sanctum of the temple of Apollo, would only have been the size of the room that I'm sitting in, and maybe even slightly smaller than this room. Isn't it interesting? So she was in a very confined and defined space, and you were not allowed to enter that space There's a saying for that too. Let's see. Yeah, there was a sign that led to the Adyton that read, "Cross the threshold." And so the acting wisdom in the temple was that you could not cross that threshold to the Adyton unless you had passed the test, you were deemed an active oracle by the committee of people who would decide this, and it was a whole committee of people in the temple, former priestesses, active and current priestesses, and even the Pythia who was leaving her role would have a say in who would take her role over. So there was one oracle at a time, always a woman, and she would have to go through several iterations and interviews and tests before and give her visions and then have them deemed suitable enough to be declared the new Pythia. Okay, so Delphi, where do these words come from, right? Have you ever wondered that? Like, why was it called the Oracle at Delphi? Like, where does Delphi come from? Delphi comes potentially from the word Delphine, which derives from the word Dracaina, Drakaina. Dracaina is the name of a female dragon serpent. Okay, the legend was that the whole reason we even have Apollo's temple is that there was a massive serpent that lived on the side of that hill that I've been talking about, on the side of Mount Parnassus. It was a massive dragon, and some accounts refer to it as a dragon, some accounts refer to it as a snake, most refer to it as a giant snake. Okay, but whether it had fire-breathing capabilities, I'm not sure. There's two different accounts. Delphi could derive from Dracaina, in which case that means that the giant snake that Apollo defeated was female. The other story that's more likely is that it was a male or masculine snake, dragon snake, named Pytho or Pytho, okay, Pytho. And so that's where the modern word python comes from. Okay, it's a massive snake. And so the legend is that Apollo defeated Pytho, and so that is why the women who had become the oracles, who had become the seers, were always called the Pythia. They were the representatives of this man who had slayed the Pytho. Does that make sense? So I think that's more accurate of a representation, because for me, Delphi being derived from Delphine, being derived from Dracaina is kind of a stretch. Dracaina is an accurate concept. So there were these kind of like dragon snakes that were referred to as the Dracaine. But I don't know that that's where Delphi comes from. I think the more accurate explanation is that the Pythia come from the name of the snake that was killed by Apollo. So Apollo constructed this temple then and dedicated these women, these oracles, these Pythias, to the gesture of channeling his will. And even into the later stages of the oracle at Delphi, it was believed that when the oracle would give her visions or dictate, as Heraclitus said, that the dictation was an accurate representation of the will of Apollo, and that will of Apollo could not be overridden. And so whatever Apollo said went, and the Pythia was the mouthpiece for that wisdom. Delphi does have ancient Greek roots in the language, and its roots take us back to the word for womb, W-O-M-B. And to me, that makes a lot more sense, that the Pythia is named for the python, and that the city of Delphi itself is named for the female womb. Because remember, Zeus had decided that this area was the omphalos, was the belly button, and so it makes sense that the entire city there, and then the temple itself, would be named for the vessel within the female body that carries life, right? So that theory for me is, with the language, makes the most sense. Now, there was a decline of, just to give you the rest of the history, there was a decline in the usage, in the significance of the oracle at Delphi, especially with the rise of the Roman Empire. Nero, who was one of the most famous emperors, as you probably know, went to the oracle at Delphi and did not hear what he wanted to hear. And he got mad and set about to manifest the dismantling of the oracle at Delphi. So all accounts say that the oracle was ill-fated once the Roman emperors started hearing stuff that didn't really gel with what they wanted to know. And so that was the beginning of the end of the rise and the fall of the oracle at Delphi. Okay, let's see if there's anything else there I wanted to tell you. So I want to talk to you briefly about what a day in the sort of life of a Pythia would be like. Because as a lot of you are training this year to become seers and channels and oracles. And again, I chose that word very carefully because an oracle is one who sees in all directions at all times, right? An oracle is one who sees not just spatially in all directions, but in terms of time and a timeline. You're able to see accurately the past, the present, and the future. And so for my perspective, when I initiate and teach you about and activate and integrate these psychic gifts this year, I really do feel like I am initiating you as a Pythia, as a priestess in the oracle. And I think that's a special thing. I have spent so much of my life trying to understand who these ancestors were for me, these wisdom keepers, and even in Minoa, where my ancestors had their temples, it was the same process. They had dedicated people who were tested and then recognized as spiritual leaders who could bring forth sacred visions, and their visions were considered the law. And so forever in these matriarchal civilizations, we have this kind of esteemed concept of women being able to not only channel their wisdom, but to declare it accurate and complete and actually influence the course and outcome of history in so many ways, as the Pythias did. So at the beginning of the day, for a priestess who is the Pythia, who is the oracle, remember there's one at a time, her day would have started in prayer and with the lighting of sacred incense, the lighting of candles, and it would have been a day spent at least for part of the day, probably a third of the day, in silence and potentially in darkness. There was an idea that the Pythia had to go within in order to express her visions without. And so she spent a lot of time in quiet contemplation, and in particular on the day of her visioning, it was a day spent in solitude for the first half. Then at midday, she would have gone for a purification. There was an entire ceremony of purification for the Pythia. Again, there's different accounts here of what this would have looked like. Some accounts say all of them include her taking a large basin of water, okay, from the local spring. So it had to be fresh running water. I think this is interesting because even today, don't you think, as mystics and channels and seers, we still feel like it's best to activate items energetically in running water. It's best to clear items energetically in running water. There is something about magical running water for those of us even who are practitioners today. So I like knowing that they would have gone to a spring, gathered up this beautiful running water, gathered it in the basin or the bowl, and then taken it back to the temple. What they did then is, and there's different stories, if they poured the water on a goat and the goat shook its coat, then they were clear to do their visions. If they poured the water on a goat and the goat didn't shake its coat, then they were not cleared. Or the other legend that I think is probably more accurate is that if the water was clear, they were allowed to proceed with the oracular session. If the water was cloudy, which is interesting because historically that could have happened for any number of reasons, right? There could have been something in the pipes, right, that would have caused the water to be clear or cloudy. Most of the time the water was clear. In fact, I haven't seen accounts of when the water was unclear and the oracle could not proceed because of that. But it was a rite of passage, this purification ceremony. And so the oracle would look into the water. If the water was clear, she was clear to give her visions. And then she would anoint with the water. And we don't have accurate accounts of what the anointing would have looked like, but it's interesting to think about her taking the water and actually applying it physically to her body as a purification exercise. And it leads me to think too, like, do you have a good, solid purification ritual in your practice that you really like? Something that helps you to prepare for ceremony or ritual. It's so fun for me when I go back to these ancient cultures and civilizations, and one of the reasons why this work never gets old for me is we still have so much to learn about how they did what they did. And these practices of cleansing and purification and asking for permission and waiting for permission, right? It's almost like an act of reverence. I really love knowing that the ancient ancestors did that. And it inspires me to think about what are some ways that we can incorporate some of these really important steps and procedures and processes into our own protocol without making things too complicated, of course, because I'm also an advocate of keeping your ceremonies and your practices fairly straightforward and simple. I think if we overcomplicate things, we're less likely to do them. So speaking of purification, since we are going to journey today and raise some energy, I want to begin by just lighting my white sage. And just bring a little bit of that through to you and into that smoke. Just releasing, letting go. You're receiving this right on the edge of the new moon. It's a great time to do this journey and to vision into what's possible for you in the year ahead. That's really my intention for this evening, or whatever time you're watching it where you are. There's no wrong time. But I think it's a really important opportunity. This is a new moon in Capricorn, which is an invitation for you to think about achievement and success and manifestation in your life, and specifically how you want to create your life, and to build your life and design your life in a way that supports you and supports your achievement and your growth and your success. So I think the timing of this particular class is really perfect. Okay. So once the purification process was complete, the priestesses in service to the oracle would have then been dismissed. They had other duties to attend to. They would go and gather cypress from the trees outside, and they would also gather olive branches from the trees outside. And they would do this once each time the Pythia would give her readings. And these were draped around where the Pythia would sit, and also just outside the temple's entrance. Cypress was believed to be a tree of wisdom, and the olive tree was a tree also of wisdom, protection, abundance. And so these were considered auspicious symbols and very important offerings to make to the Pythia. And so while the Pythia would go and prepare to channel her visions, her priestesses would go and gather these important branches and offerings to set in the place of her reading. Now, the one of the most important things for me about tonight, about our classes in the year ahead, and the intention behind the perfume in particular, is that there is an inscription on the outside of the oracle. And your tools for February are going to include a garnet necklace that has this inscribed in ancient Greek, which I think is really cool. So we'll talk more about that in February. But the translation of it is very simple. What it said on the outside of the oracle at Delphi is this: know thyself. That was it. The most important wisdom that was shared with visitors who would come to the oracle was those two words: know thyself. And it's interesting, if you look at Western literature, for example, even Shakespeare, right, to thy own self be true, and so many of the incredible literary scholars and writers, and how many times that concept of self-awareness, self-knowledge, know thyself, to thine own self be true, that has become actually a touchstone. In almost every culture, there's this idea that to be truly wise, begins with really knowing you and who you are. And I also think it's cool that this is reflected now in modern metaphysical practice and wisdom, right? At the end of the day, we believe in the metaphysical space through quantum mechanics and physics, right, and through multidimensional layers of reality, that at the end of the day, everybody in your life is just a mirror back to you of you. If somebody bothers you, it's most likely because there's something in that person or what they're doing or saying that reminds you of something in you that you don't like or isn't resolved. And when you fall in love with someone or think they're so amazing or they have so many skills and gifts, most of the time you have those skills and gifts. It's harder to see the beauty in yourself. It's much easier for humans to see beauty in other people. And so it's this kind of shift in perspective to recognize that if everything in the world is just a reflection of you, then ultimately living a good life means learning more about who you are and focusing on becoming the best and brightest and most aware and alive and activated version of you. That's actually the best gift you can give to the world. And that a life well lived is nothing more than an authentic life where you have really deep knowledge of yourself. I think it's very easy, even in spiritual contexts, not to be honest with yourself, not to be self-aware. You know, as a teacher, one of the things I've noticed, and I'm always looking at this and for this, so it might be helpful for you as my student to know this, especially if you're new, is that I teach you concepts, right, and philosophies and practices all year long. And one of the things I'm looking for is how you integrate those into your own life, right? You know, we work on concepts in our classes, for example, of, you know, a lot of times people have a need to be seen, right? And so they will act in certain ways or do certain things that are counterproductive to their own health and well-being and inner peace, but they do them subconsciously because they need attention and to be seen in order to feel fulfilled. And that often is rooted in, this is just an example, but that often is rooted in childhood experiences where parents ignored the child or didn't pay attention or didn't care or weren't invested, right? So then the adult child then goes out into the world and feels a constant need for external validation. And so when I teach certain concepts, like the shadow and like, you know, how interrelating with other people and recognizing when you are acting from a place of needing attention versus acting from a place of intention. My expectation is you take that wisdom in and then you look and you say, oh, I do that sometimes. Next time I'm going to catch myself and I'm not going to do that. That is the goal, right, of spiritual practice, is to start to identify your own patterns and then mitigate them, overcome them, override them. The next time it comes up, react differently, right? Don't show up in the same way or in the same form or in the same patterns and habits and behaviors. It's hard for all of us. I mean, I struggle too. I still have my learning edges and places I need to grow and improve, and I try to come consciously to each moment of my life and say, oh yeah, this is probably an opportunity to practice that thing I'm still not good at, right? And I still screw up a good chunk of the time and look back later and go, I think that was a test, and I don't think I did very well. But we have to cut ourselves slack. I mean, the reality is we're all works in progress, or we wouldn't be here anymore. You know, if we were all ascended, we wouldn't have to really be doing this human thing. So, but all to say that it brings me back to this inscription, know thyself, because I really think as a healer, whether you're a crystal healer or a Reiki healer or a shamanic healer of whatever kind, or a body worker, or however you move energy for people, right? There's different ways to move energy. You might be a channel or a hypnotherapist, or, you know, however you access the energy field of the people that you're working with. I think it's a gift and a responsibility to be aware of who you are and how you're coming into that work and that relationship. What you're looking to experience as the teacher or the healer or the leader. and ultimately what you are learning in the process of teaching and coaching and mentoring people. So that self-awareness is so important because it keeps us from getting into dysfunctional relationship patterns that are codependent, right? That might not be supporting us in terms of the highest evolution of our spiritual growth. We want to be sovereign and be able to stand on our own and bring our gifts forward in our own ways. And so if we constantly feel reliant or we're not aware of how we're operating, then it makes it very difficult to do that. So everything I'm telling you right now is kind of the why of this course this year, and it's also the why of this journey. As I take you into the Adyton tonight, the inner sanctum of inner sanctums, the inner sanctuary of sanctuaries, the most holy place in ancient Greece. That's where we're going tonight. And as I take you in there, my primary objective and my goal and my intention is for you to gain some self-awareness tonight. You know, you have just come through, I have just come through 2 of the most challenging years that human beings can experience. When I reflect back on where I was in January of 2020, getting ready to go to Tucson and having no idea, you know, that I would spend after that the next 18 months with my kids learning from home and my, you know, me working from home and all of these things. Like I just had, you know, no real foresight that that was coming. I did have a sense intuitively that there was an adjustment ahead, right? I could feel, and a lot of you remember different classes and different things I said. It was interesting to hear your reflections too, because I was talking about a shift and a change in the dynamics and how we interact with each other and how we interact with our planet. And I could foresee kind of this tension point kind of brewing, but I did not realize it would manifest in the way that it did. And I think there's been positives and negatives out of that. This isn't about that, but the point to tell you, the reason I'm coming back to this is, you know, I think we've been through a shift as a collective, right? We've been through a shift as the planet, as a planet, and it's going to take some time to integrate that. You know, when you do really big, deep spiritual work, and I think we have in the last 2 years for ourselves and our communities and our families, it takes time to make meaning and make sense and to take the wisdom that you gather from an experience like that and find out where it lives now in your body and in your mind and in your spirit, and then what parts of it need to be released and transmuted, right? And so I want you to come into this exercise tonight from a place of genuine curiosity. You know, who are you now in light of everything that you've been through these last 2 years? And maybe it's more than that for you. Maybe it's 4 years, maybe it's 5 years that you're really looking back and going, I've actually kind of been in the thick of it for longer than that, right? So you can expand or contract that timeline to really reflect what makes the most sense for you. But I think the most important part is for you to decide and set an intention even now as I'm talking to you, just to prepare. Where in your life do you need greater self-awareness, greater self-discernment, so greater personal wisdom, the ability to know thyself? Is it in your relationship? Is it at work? Is it as a parent or a godparent or grandparent? Is it as a sibling? Maybe you have some complex relationships within your family that need to be navigated carefully. And so where could greater self-awareness, inner discernment really benefit you? I think it's appropriate for us to think about gaining inner wisdom before we go out into the world and serve as oracles and guides and mentors for other people. I really do. I think it's like I said, a responsibility that we have, but I also think it's a gift that we give people, because when you are doing your own work and you're not projecting your work onto other people, it creates space for them. You know what I mean? And this work, spiritual work, has to be about the other person. It has to be about the person that you're trying to help. It can't always be about them and about you as a healer at the same time. So, and different traditions have different languages for this. They'll say, oh, you know, the hollow bone, right? That at our best as healers, we're the hollow bone. we aren't holding anything. We're just kind of a channel for wisdom and insight to come through and pass through. We don't take anything personally because there's nothing in there, you know. So it's like information in, information out, wisdom in, wisdom out, discernment in, discernment out. At our best, I think that's what we are, is open channels. But that requires that in other parts of your life, you're doing a lot of really intense inner work to navigate that landscape and figure out where you still have areas of development and growth that need to be attended to. Okay, so, and then once the Pythia gave her vision, that was it. She would speak these kind of poetic lines, and whether you understood them or liked them was not her concern. The extent of her commitment as the oracle was simply to provide, to dictate the information. And then how it was received and translated and activated was up to the person who was being read for. Which I think is interesting too. You know, I sometimes in our Western culture, I have often felt like we don't like mystery. we kind of want people to spell things out. Like even I was talking about this in our Crystal Secrets bonus class, which you have as well. I was saying how some people are just like, no, but tell me how crystals work. I hear what you're saying, but like, is that crystal working? And they'll point to something over on a shelf, and it's like, no, but did you hear what I said though? Like, they have their own frequency, they have their own energy field. No, I know, but how do I know if it's working? Like, is it gonna light up or levitate? You know, and it's like, so it's yeah, it's important for us to recognize, you know, that expanding wisdom in this way is critical before we go out into the world and try to share that wisdom with other people. We have to really have our own inner sense of how magic works, how energy works, how frequency works, how wisdom works, and then we can go and share that wisdom with other people too. You probably have had experiences like that of your own, and as I was saying in the Crystal Secrets video, you know, it's I don't blame people who don't understand sometimes how things in the mystical and metaphysical world work. It's very complex, and because we're human, we can't see it. Our vibration is too low. We can't see the spirit world, and we can't see the inner workings, and we can't see the energetic field, the subtle body, you know? So it's like we're at a real disadvantage because of our lack of vision, outer vision. But when we cultivate the inner vision, it sort of trumps that, you know? It gives us a deeper way of understanding, and so even if we can't prove it to people, we at least have the satisfaction of having our own understanding and our own way of thinking about these very complex things and making sense of it for ourselves, which can help us to translate and communicate with others about it too. So I would like to talk to you about your Journey to Adyton perfume. I'm so glad you love it. There's been such great feedback in social media. We made it with a lot of love. And I hope that this will become your new favorite channeling perfume. The notes are amorous, which helps you to release fear. Blue tansy, which raises your base frequency. So if you're feeling down or discouraged, this is going to be your go-to potion, because it's going to lift your mood a little bit. Both of those oils are very powerful in that way. Blue tansy really does raise the frequency. This is also a great anointing oil. Like if you get a new crystal and you're bringing it into your collection and you want to raise the frequency or balance the energy or harmonize the energy with other crystals in your collection, this is going to be a good oil for you to use. Orris butter is actually for inner vision and prophecy work. Orris butter is one of the most expensive essential oils that you can buy. It's crazy expensive. The real deal is in here, enough that you can really smell it. And I wanted you to have the real energy of Orris, because Orris is all about prophecy and cultivating the inner landscape and the inner vision, the inner sanctuary. It's a very seductive, very feminine, very lunar oil, and so it reminds me in so many ways of the power of the Pythia and the Priestess. And then sandalwood is for consciousness, conscious awareness. Verbena opens the central channel. Rose is also a channel opener, a heart opener. And then Fregonia is an oil that we've only used in this blend. We didn't use it for anything else at SG. I kind of wanted there to be one oil in this blend that no matter what you've worked with from me before, you never quite touched it before, that's Fregonia. And Fregonia is very interesting. It activates the soul star chakra. Super, super, super upper chakra. So all of these are. Blue Tansy is third eye and crown. The Orris butter is soul star chakra. The Fregonia is soul star chakra. The Amorous is lower chakra. So is sandalwood. So you do have a little bit of balance. So we're going to put some on our wrists for what we do, a little at our third eye for what we see, and then a little at our ankles for where we go. Just to cover our steps. And then heading over to the grid, and you will need a double terminated wand to activate this grid with me tonight. If you don't have one, you might have a quartz point in your collection that you can use, which would be a very suitable alternative as well. So one of the things I'm going to recommend that you do is take your oil, and I like to do this with my finger, and just anoint each of the crystals with this blend. We've got clear quartz in the center here, your generator, right? We have spinel, which is the purple stone here. I'm going to explain all these stones in a second, why we chose them. Petrified wood, we've got azurite, we've got zircon, and we've got Kambaba jasper. And then I think your set came with 5 quartz points, but I'm only using 4. You can choose to use 5 or 4, completely up to you. There's no benefit or downside to not using them. And so all the stones have been anointed. It's also nice, like our class bell from last session, I'm gonna anoint this too. It just raises the vibration of anything that it touches. So any of your sacred tools that you want to activate. I've got my little, those of you who were with me last year know what these are. These are my little channeling stones when I do readings. I'm going to take this opportunity as well to anoint my pendulum that I use all the time. It's like a good little turbo recharge of your sacred tools. And then this one too. And that way everything has been covered with that beautiful essence. And hold on to that. I only have 1 bottle of it. I love it though, and I always wear patchouli, as you know, and it's just my favorite oil. It grounds me and helps me stay in my body, and that's truthfully why I wear it, which is a lot of what we were talking about in the Crystal Secrets class too. It's really hard for empaths to stay in their bodies, so a lot of times we will gravitate toward some of the more grounding oils because those help us to stay embodied and not be floating in the upper chakras. But in any case, Adyton with patchouli is really yummy. So if you have any patchouli around and you haven't tried that combination yet, you might really love it. Okay, so we chose these crystals with a lot of intention for you, and I'll tell you why. Tonight's journey is definitely to the inner sanctum of the Oracle at Delphi, and there's no doubt about it. But I've given you crystals here that are the oldest on the planet that I have in my inventory at SG. All of these crystals are in the millions of years old, maybe with the exception of azurite, which might be more like in the tens and hundreds of thousands. But petrified wood is in the millions. Certainly zircon is in the millions. Zircon and spinel are some of the original minerals on the planet. So these two right here. Kambaba jasper is actually a fossil, and it was one of the first forms of life on the planet. A lot of people don't know that about Kambaba jasper. And so what I've tried to do here, this is the masculine duo. Kambaba jasper and petrified wood are very much about connecting with the roots of the planet, right? What was under the ocean? What was under the forest? These are very earthy, grounding, connecting crystals. Zircon and Spinel, from my perspective, connect you more with the feminine origins of the planet. And azurite is also a very feminine stone. So these are about more of the feminine ways of knowing, ways of connecting, which is more about receiving. And these are more about the creation of the planet, the growth structures of the planet, how the planet actually formed, which to me is more masculine and projective. So that's the grid we're working with. And what I want you to recognize as we activate the grid is that, you know, tonight is about ancient Greece, but it's also about where did you begin? You know, I mean, I did begin in ancient Greece. At least half my lineage was. The other half of my lineage is debated. And unfortunately, it will never be settled because everybody who probably could settle it is gone now. So I know a little bit about my mom's family, but it's very limited compared to my dad, where we have, my aunt was quite a genealogist, and my mom was too, but her genealogy was more difficult to track. But my aunt has all of the records, and it's very meticulous and everything back to the roots of the foundations of ancient Greece. And so, but tonight I want you to think about what that is for you. What's your oracle? You know, when your ancestors were cultivating their own inner wisdom in their villages, in their cities, in their temples, in their sanctuaries, what did that look like? Do you know where that was? You know, was that in northern territories, or was that in southern territories? Did that find your ancestors in what would be Central and South America today? Or would it have been, you know, is it Aboriginal in Australia? Or I don't know what your origin story is, but I do know that we all have one. And so part of knowing thyself tonight, right, this inner ability to connect with who we are and what matters and why we're here, I think it'd be really cool if tonight during our journey, and I'm going to create space for that, if you would really focus on where your oracle story begins. Who were the seers and the mystics and the magicians and the channels in your personal original civilization? How did they channel their wisdom? What were their gifts? What were obstacles that they faced in the process of cultivating those gifts? And how did they overcome those obstacles? You know, in ancient Greece, it was the Romans who didn't like what they heard and then all of a sudden said, you know, all done with the oracle. But in other civilizations, it could have been a different ending, a different conclusion to how that wisdom was brought forward. So I am going to create space in tonight's journey for you to explore that. And I hope you'll do it with some interest and excitement, because it's fun to think about the fact that you are part of a lineage, right? You are part of a legacy of people who have been cultivating these same gifts in so many ways for thousands of years, for millennia. And while you may not be aware of a modern, you know, chord, like your grandmother maybe wasn't psychic or gifted, how do you know that her grandmother wasn't? You know, how back did the stories go that you are familiar with? And then what are the stories underneath the ones that you're familiar with? And even if you don't have ancestors anymore who can answer those questions, because like I said, so many of mine are gone now, I think in Journey we can still get the answer in the medicine. I really do. I think we can still find track the story back. And certainly in Soul Shift this year, especially when I take you into psychometry and psychocartography, which are going to be two of our spiritual gifts, our intuitive gifts that we're cultivating in Soul Shift, I'm going to teach you how to read objects and land. And I think that's going to open up a whole new world of possibilities for you in terms of accessing information and wisdom and practices from your own lineage. Being able to touch something from an ancestor and immediately be taken through the timelines to find the origin story there, or going back to where your grandmother was born and touching that land, and again being able to collapse and condense timelines to access and activate all that wisdom can be a real game changer. So I hope you're excited about Soul Shift this year, because new doorways are opening to awareness, and it has the real potential to shift your perspective and to heal and to answer a lot of questions that you may have been carrying around for a really long time too. So I hope you're ready and excited. All right, so let's activate a grid, shall we, darling? Let's do this. So, and this is a grid, by the way, that I think you should leave up the whole year, or as long as you want to. I like to activate grids and deactivate grids always at the new moon. The new moon is always my cosmic clean slate, you know, so anyway, if we're putting this up at an auspicious time, and I would recommend if you want to take it down, I would wait until the next new moon to do that, just as a little guidance there. Some of you are new, so I want to make sure I answer all the possible anticipated questions. So we're going to start here at our quartz generator, and we're going to call in wisdom. Ooh. Yes, indeed. You know what? I did not open my circle first, so let me do that. I would prefer to open the circle for this because we are going to raise energy, and I could open it after, before the journey, but I think I would like to open it now. Let's do that. Let's make a nice deep cleansing breath. Draw in the breath from your belly, not from your diaphragm, for a deeper, deeper expression. And then exhale. Just sit there for a second, feels good. And I'm going to open our circle. And just very gently call in our guides and guardians tonight. Just a quick calling in, but it's important to do. And let the drum beat bring you into the space, help you soften and relax. This is your time, nowhere to be, nowhere to go. This is just for you. And so to the guides and the guardians of the East, I welcome you in. Opening a portal to a new year, a new moon, new wisdom, new insights. We welcome the guides and the guardians of the East. And then welcoming in the guides and the guardians of the South, power portal, fire portal. Calling in wisdom and transformation tonight, courage, strength. Remembering who we are, where we've come from, help us understand where we're going, right? Welcoming in the guides and the guardians of the South. Next, to the guides and the guardians of the West. Gateway of water, portal of emotional healing, helping us to heal tonight by learning where our roots are, connecting with the divine feminine, the temple of Apollo, gathering from her the Pythia, wisdom and strength, energies of prophecy, channeling and divination. And welcoming in the guides and the guardians of the West. And last but not least, the guides and the guardians of the North. Steady guardians of patience and peace, purpose and presence. Help us to anchor into this wisdom, to this history, to this mystery, learning who we are, where we came from, our roots and our origins. it is. Okay. Now, we shall charge and activate our grid. So again, I want you to charge this and activate this for you. This is, this represents my lineage, but it can also represent yours in very specific ways. Also, if there are crystals you would like to add to this, maybe there's a crystal from the country where you were born or that represents the energies of the place that you come from, please feel free to add that. I think that would be a really nice personal touch for this too. And now would be the time to do that before we activate, because you don't want to add crystals to grids once they're activated. You kind of want to, set it and forget it, let it be. So we're going to begin at the center here, activating quartz for magnification, power, expansion. Then we're going to go out to the outermost piece of quartz on the other side, okay? Let me move this side so you can see. Out to quartz for magnification and expansion, and back to quartz for magnification and expansion. And then out to spinel for manifestation, for wisdom, for strength, and for healing, and back to quartz for magnification. Out to quartz for magnification and programming, back to quartz for magnification and programming. Out to petrified wood for grounding, wisdom, strength, masculine guidance. So much in petrified wood. To the roots and the bones, and back to quartz for magnification. Out to quartz for magnification and programming, back to quartz for magnification and programming. Out to zircon to help connect us with the beginnings of our lineage, taking us back to the roots of the civilizations that we come from and helping us to gather the wisdom there. And back to quartz for magnification. To azurite for wisdom and intuition, psychic visions, opening the channel. And back to quartz for magnification. Out to quartz for magnification and programming, and back to quartz for magnification. To Kambaba jasper for connecting us with the energies of the ocean and the origins of our planet there, connecting us to water energy and also to energies of protection and strength, and back to quartz for magnification. Woo! And so we charge this grid and activate this grid to represent each of us, where we've come from and where we are going, the roots and the leaves, the beginning and the present day of our lineage on this planet. We call in that wisdom, we give thanks for that wisdom, and we vow to act upon that wisdom in our lives in a good way. And together we say, Amen, Aho, and so it is. Amen, Aho, and so it is. Now, what I would like for you to do, if it feels good to you, is gather up the energy of this grid right here through this termination of your wand. And now I want you to turn your wand over and touch the selenite wand. So we are connecting the two. We are charging this selenite wand with the energy of that grid. And so with this quartz, I charge and activate this selenite to hold the energy of this origin grid, to connect us to our deepest vision, deepest wisdom, and deepest lineage roots in this lifetime. Amen, Aho, and so it is. And I did that because now this tool will carry that vibration. So when you can't have your whole grid with you, but you want to be kind of connected to this energy, I like to lay with selenite on my chest between my heart and my solar plexus chakra, because that's the center of your energy field. Selenite is one of the only minerals that does indeed come from ancient Greece. This is not Greek selenite, but there is such a thing. And so I thought it was a nice connection to Apollo and to the Oracle and all of that, but I also wanted you to have a functioning tool coming out of this class tonight that you can always use to open and close your circles. So I'm going to close when we're done tonight with this wand. You can take this and decorate this. You can add chipstones and starry ribbons and terminations if you want, or just keep it like it is. It's a beautiful, just wand of pure white light, and it's perfect for opening and closing circles. So that's kind of a little bonus gift to you coming out of tonight's session that I hope you love. Okay. want you to relax your shoulders. If you're seated or if you're laying down, I want you to take a moment just to press your lower back down into the floor so you feel really connected with the floor. I'm just going to play the root chakra bowl very gently just to connect us in with this frequency of grounding, protection, and total healing. I want you to notice how the frequency of this particular bowl just invites you into a real state of presence. It's a be here now vibration. You can almost feel your hips just sort of connecting more with the floor when your body aligns to this frequency, to this vibration. And you can give yourself just some really comforting mantras here, like all is well, I am safe. All is well, I am safe. All is well, I am safe. I am connected. I am held. I am anchored. I am balanced. I am aligned. Just take a nice deep breath there. And exhale. Just feel yourself falling into a deeper and deeper and deeper state of meditation. You may feel like you want to fall asleep, and that's okay. Sometimes your spirit guides want to take you away for a little while. Just let yourself be at peace for these moments. And let's take another nice deep breath here. And exhale. So to begin our journey, I want to have you consciously unwind the clock of this lifetime with me. Let's go back in time, decades, to childhood. I want you to just imagine an image of yourself at 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. Just pull up the clearest image you can in your mind's eye of what that time in your life was like, who you were at that time, what you might have looked like, or the sound of your voice at that time. And now let's go back a little further to infancy, 2 years, 1 year, 6 months. Really feeling yourself connecting into that root chakra, which takes us back to these years of our lives, 0 to 5. It's when your root chakra is forming. And let's go back 6 months, 4 months, 2 months. Let's go back to birth. Let's imagine that we can return to the womb in this moment, the womb that you came from. to make the very sacred journey back to the womb of the planet that Zeus identified. So through your mother's womb, through all of your mother's wombs, we make the journey now to Delphi, because all of those paths lead back to the original womb. I'm just giving thanks for finding our unique pathways back to the womb of the planet. Let your soul just gently float back in time to that beautiful temple on the side of Mount Parnassus, dedicated for the work of divination and spirit guidance. And as you find yourself in that sacred place, I want you to imagine that you are at the entrance to the temple now. And the entrance to the temple has beautiful columns, almost so tall you can't see the top. You have beautiful marble, a gorgeous Parian marble that sparkles in the sunlight. And as you mount the stairs that lead to the main entrance to the temple, I want you to notice that the sun is shining, beautiful bright blue sky. So typical of a constantly stunning and so warm Mediterranean weather. You can gently hear the wind moving through the trees, the cypress trees and the olive trees. Maybe it's blowing through your hair. And as you find yourself now at the main entrance to the temple, I want you to imagine that the door opens before you, as if you've been anticipated at this place as a very special guest of the oracle herself. And I want you to connect now with your intention for this journey today, because the oracle is going to ask you what wisdom you seek. And your answer can be as simple tonight as, I seek to know myself. I seek greater awareness, discernment of myself. Or you can choose to understand more about your lineage and your ancestors and their magic, their wisdom, their divination, their secrets and secret knowledge. And as you enter the temple, you notice how much movement and activity there is. It's actually a busy place. And to one side, you can see the priestesses who are gathering the olive branches and the cypress branches, and they're weaving them into wreaths that they will place at the oracle's feet. And they are gathering them into bouquets with roses and other flowers that smell so beautiful, and preparing to adorn the temple for ceremony. And to the left, other priestesses are cleaning and tidying, gathering water from the spring for the purification ceremony, preparing the basin. And off in the distance, you can see the candles and other forms of illumination are being lit right now. And it's so beautiful. You can see the columns and the shadows that they cast as the candlelight flickers. And there are torches off in the distance. They've been lit as well. They're at the far four corners of the temple. And as you move deeper into the temple, you realize that those candles and torches are the only source of illumination in here, because you're moving to the inner sanctum, which is protected from daylight and protected from the eyes of anyone who isn't welcome here. And so a simple staircase takes you down now toward the Adyton, toward the inner sanctum. And you've been invited to join the Oracle here today. And as you venture into this inner sanctuary of inner sanctuaries, this most sacred and holy place of holy places, I want you to sense the magic in you stirring, your faith being kindled. Everything in your life leading up to this moment has led you here. And there's something in you and your lineage that wants to reconnect you with your magic and your wisdom. And take a moment here just to sense, how does it feel to be in this inner place, to cross this threshold that most mortals will never cross? And just take a moment to enjoy what it means to receive this blessing and this honor and this wisdom as you're escorted into this incredibly sacred place. And notice how you feel welcome here. You feel reverent, but you also feel excited to be here. You know that you're going to walk away with valuable wisdom and reflections that are going to help you and heal you. And just set the intention with me that you'll remember everything you need to from this journey, so that when the time comes and we come back to our present day and time and moment, that you'll have all of the wisdom that you need from this experience. And so up ahead you can see that there is a tall seat, almost like a throne, that's about 5 feet from the floor. And there are steps up to the chair that the Pythia will climb. And you can see that the priestesses have taken the wreaths and they have laid them at the feet of that incredible seat. And you can smell the resins burning in the incense as they clear and consecrate the space for her to begin. And as she climbs those steps up to her seat and takes her seat and turns around, a final smaller wreath of olive and cypress is placed on her head. And she turns and looks at you. And she asks, as she would have, "What do you seek here?" And so it's time to ask your question of the Pythia now. What is your question of the Oracle? What is the wisdom or answer or insight that you seek? She receives. So we're going to give her a few minutes to sit in her seat of wisdom with your question. And while we do, I want you to let your soul soar for a minute. Imagine that from here you can travel she is gathering her wisdom. Let's go back to your origin temple, your civilization, your lineage, and instantly feel how you are transported your soul go where it wants to go, see what it needs to see, fly where it wants to fly. And now let's bring soul and body back together. Let's fly back to the Temple of Apollo. The Pythia has signaled that she's ready to deliver her vision, to dictate her poem for you. And when you're ready, I want you to listen for the words that will come. I'm going to go quiet for a minute or two and just let you receive your oracle vision tonight in the Adyton. Received your wisdom. Remember, sometimes the messages are cryptic. The Pythia was not clear. Most of the time, she would speak in metaphors and analogies, and sometimes it was not clear at all what she would say. But maybe you got something very clear. I got something relatively clear. So I'm hoping you did too. Now let's take this minute here. I would like for you to ask any additional questions that you have here about your lineage, your medicine, your gifts, where they come from, who they come from, and maybe also some recommendations from her for ways to cultivate those gifts. And let's see what she has to say. taking that additional wisdom, information, feedback from her now, and kind of mixing it in with what you received from her originally. Take a moment just to loop those two narratives or pieces of information together. And I want you to decide here on a commitment that you can make or an action that you can take that will help you activate what you just received from her tonight. What is something that you can do consciously now in your life that will be reflective of or in honor of what you have received this evening? Take a moment, and I want you to, in whatever way feels right to you, express your gratitude to the oracle for the wisdom that you've received this evening. Maybe it feels like an offering of a crystal that you will leave at her feet. That feels right to you. Maybe it's imagining that you pluck a piece of the olive branch or the cypress branch from one of her wreaths and offer it to her personally. It could just be a bow to her to say thank you before we leave her inner sanctum of inner sanctums. So we give thanks to you tonight, to the Pythia, to the oracle, to the one who sees and knows and speaks the will of Apollo. We give thanks for wisdom, for our lives, for reflections of our own lineage this evening, and for guidance on how to bring this wisdom forward in our lives this year in a good way. Amen. Aho. So it is. I want you to take one or two or maybe even just a few more inhales of your Adyton perfume right now while we're here in this inner sanctum, because like I said, this perfume is going to come to be kind of, I hope, a touchstone for you this year. Just a blend that you always take with you into divination, into journey. And so let's make a scent association between this place of very deep awareness tonight at the beginning of the year, ahead of our work, and the work that lies ahead for us this year. Okay. And so the Pythia begins her descent from her seat of wisdom now that she has shared her poem with you. And so as she descends those few stairs from her seat and begins to approach you, she will walk around you and in front of you and lead you out of the Adyton, out of the inner sanctum. And then behind you, you can feel the presence of a few of her priestesses who are gathering the wreaths and the flowers and everything that was left at the base of the chair. Those will be taken up to the outer level of the temple and placed there as offerings to Apollo. And that would have been part of a traditional oracle ceremony. And so as you make your processional way out of the temple, the inner sanctum, leaving the Adyton, crossing that really sacred threshold. Yeah. And again, again, just reflecting on what an honor and privilege and blessing it was to step into that space and feel that connection, such a sacred, sacred place and time that really did exist in our history. The remnants of it, the relics of it are there today. And so as you step forward into the main temple now and move toward the front entrance, you start to feel the sunlight on you. The temperature in the room shifts and changes, and as the temple doors open out before you, you're met with just this sweeping view of the city of Delphi, and below you, of course, Athens, and then behind you, the towering Mount Parnassus. And it's like you can see forever. The views are so clear, not a cloud in the sky. Just as we came, we will return. So from this sacred womb space back to the sacred womb space of your own mother. Let your soul fly and transition we've been in together, back to this lifetime, back to your mother and her womb, her space of creation for you. And then let's move through that womb, deliver ourselves again back to this moment. So fast forwarding to birth, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, to 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, to 10 and 12, 14. And let's come back to our 20s now. And I'm going to drop you wherever you are. So if you're in your 20s right now, you can stay right here. And come forward to your 30s. And you can stay there if that's where you are, or come forward to your 40s. And I'll stay here. And then you can move forward to the 50s if that's where you are. 60s, 70s, as far forward as you need to go to be where you are in this day and time and year, this timeline, this dimension. And now start to notice the room that you're in, the temperature. Turn your head from side to side. Wiggle fingers, wiggle toes. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. How are you? Where did you go? I bet you went a few places when we flew from the Temple of Apollo to a place that's more unique to your lineage. I hope that it was easy for you to make that transition to see what you needed to see tonight about your origin story, where you've come from, how you got here, which is going to really create a beautiful platform for our Soulship program this year, because from this place of becoming consciously aware of what may have been only subconscious so far about, like, who are my ancestors and what were their gifts and which temples were they in when they were delivering their oracular visions. So if you have a little taste of that tonight, of where that would have been or what that would have looked like, I think that's really beautiful and will create a really awesome foundation for the work ahead of us this year. journey space. I'm going to open our circle and release our sweet guides and guardians, beginning where we left off. So releasing the guides and the guardians of the north, thanking them for their wisdom, their support, their protection and patience during our journey this evening. We release you with gratitude. Thanking and releasing the guides and the guardians of the west, helping us find emotional healing and renewal, faith in our past, in our lineage, and in the hands of the Oracle herself. And then thanking and releasing the guides and the guardians of the south. Thank you for strength and transformation, for helping us to see our lives and our past lives from a new perspective. And then thanking and releasing the guides and the guardians of the east. Thank you for opening this new doorway to wisdom for us, for creating new possibilities, for deeper inner wisdom and awareness, so that we may truly learn to know thyself. And together we say, Amen, Ahu, and so it is. Amen, Ahu, and so it is. And so, I meant to release our circle with this wand, so I'm going to do it a second time with the one that you and I charged this evening. So I am double releasing us this evening. And I do want to teach you one additional tip that might be really helpful for you every time we do divination. You know, I spent some time tonight teaching you about the processes and the protocols and the purification steps that the original priestesses and the Pythias of Delphi would have gone through, really to underscore to you how important it is to cleanse and clear the space before we do our sacred readings and forms of divination. So one technique that you can do, and all you need is a selenite stick like this is actually the perfect size, is you want to start right at your crown chakra, and we are going to pull energy down to the four sides, the four directions, to clear each one of those directions, okay? So, and I always like to start in the east. It's just part of my training, and it's just how I do my own work. So I'm going to pull this down to the eastern direction. West is over here in my room. So I'm pulling it down to the east, and then I'm going to touch the floor, okay? And back up to the east. And then I'm going to go to the south, which is behind me in my room. So from my crown chakra down to the south, in one continuous movement, touch the floor, bring it back, okay? Then to the west, one continuous movement, and bring it back. And then to the north, one continuous movement, and bring it back. If you want, once you've done that, you can leave the wand on the floor and draw a circle on the floor with your wand, one continuous movement. You do not want to lift the wand from the floor if you're doing this. And that puts you in really, truly, an energetic chamber. You have cleared the energy from all four sides of you and drawn a perimeter around you. That is probably one of the most energetically sound containers for doing ceremony that I can imagine. The only thing I will tell you is if you do the last part where you open the circle, you do have to, you do have to close the circle. You do have to complete that. So then you'll go counterclockwise again on the floor, not breaking contact with the floor. So take your time. If you break contact, you got to do it again. If you just do the east, the south, the west, and the north, you do not need to undo anything or redo anything. And in fact, that's something you can do sitting in, if you're driving in traffic and you have something happens and throws you off your center. If you keep a selenite stick in your car, that's something you can do anywhere you are. And then just touch the seats. You want to touch earth, okay? You want to take the energy from the crown down to an earth source. So the floor that you're in, the chair that you're sitting in, the seat, the driver's seat that you're sitting in. This is a quick, easy technique. And you can do it anytime, anywhere. It's very similar to what we've talked about in the past as like the bubbling technique of energy to kind of put you in an egg or put you in a cocoon so that you feel really safe and connected and protected. And so hopefully that's a helpful tip for you as well for your practice. All right. Well, I am just double checking my notes to make sure I shared everything that I had intended for tonight, and I did. So I hope you enjoyed every single minute of this journey to Adyton. It was a kind of a homecoming for me, and it helped me share with you the reason why I chose to name this program that you're entering, if you're in Soul Shift. The reason I chose to name it the Oracle Program, because that is the birthplace of the planet, according to Zeus. That oracle space on Mount Parnassus was where the eagles crossed. But that is also the birthplace of what we think of today as Western divination, right? From ancient Greece, those trainings and techniques have unfolded and expanded out to other civilizations. And I believe that divination began in Lemuria, continued in Atlantis, then moved from Atlantis to Egypt, and then from Egypt to Greece. And so that is my understanding of really the origins of what it means to do divination or to do psychic or intuitive work. And so there's a lineage that we're tapping into that goes way beyond ancient Greece, and also can tether you to your origin stories too, to the ancient Norse traditions and their seer traditions, which are very powerful and just as powerful as the ancient Greeks. And of course, there were many, many different wisdom and divination traditions in Central and South America and every other part of the world. And so the Greek story is not the only story, but I thought it was beautiful to center this year's program around one of the primary origin stories, and one that directly comes from my lineage that I can translate to you from a place of knowing, because it is true in my blood and in my body. I feel very much a divine and intimate connection to that part of the world. But what I love about this most is that we really are plugging back in, not to ancient Greece when we do divination. It goes way further back than that. We're plugging into Atlantis and Lemuria. We're going back to our spiritual roots in this class. And I hope, I intend that as you awaken some of these gifts, you might even have past life memories of Lemuria or past life memories of Atlantis, where some of those skills and techniques that you used to have as a priestess and a healer and a seer will come back to you, will be reactivated again in you. And so my goal is that at the end of this year, your intuitive gifts will be stronger than they've ever been. And a lot of you already have very strong intuitive gifts, and I want to honor that and acknowledge that. It is absolutely true. We have people in this group who have been doing powerful divination work for decades. And so you are already an expert. My goal is just to double click and help things get a little bit bigger, or maybe show you a side or a face of a gift that maybe you hadn't thought about before, a new definition of clairaudience, or like I said, learning to read land if that isn't something you've been exposed to before, or if you have, maybe offering you a different perspective or a different angle on how to do that work. And so I hope you're excited, I hope you're ready, and I also hope you're ready to learn from other people in this group too. You have some powerhouse folks in your mix. But whether you are brand new or a powerhouse, my goal is to bring you a really beautiful and dynamic and fun, but also awe-inspiring journey this year. And we have only just begun. So classes will begin next week, the week of the 10th. In the meantime, be well, everybody. Blessed new moon in Capricorn. Make sure you set your intentions. Very important to set those intentions at the first new moon of the year. And it's a good one, especially for energies of achievement and success. And so make sure you take absolute time and space in your schedule before you're out of that new moon window. You'll be receiving this video on Monday. And so you can absolutely do my ceremony from Sunday anytime until midnight, I would say, on Monday or early Tuesday morning. So feel free to go back and watch that ritual if you miss it for any reason. And on we go, you guys. I will see you in class very, very soon. Until then, enjoy your Facebook groups, enjoy these free bonus classes, and I'll see you later.